If the internet has become some sort of holy scripture for millennials, then Instagram and Pinterest are definitely the Psalms and Proverbs. You probably know what I'm talking about. Our favorite little passages, things like, "The mountains are calling, and I must go." "Oh, darling, let's be adventurers." Or simply, "Let's get lost." Sometimes we get tattoos of these things. They say "homeward bound" or "destination unknown." And our favorite Pinterest prophecies get framed and hung on our walls so that we can wake up every morning reminded to eat and pray and love. It wasn't too long ago I might have been some sort of fundamentalist of this strange little faith. This was about 6 years ago. My wife and I owned a small house in Iowa City. There wasn't too much to it. It had a postage stamp yard, a hammock between a couple trees. It was very simple, but it was very us, and we loved this house. But we knew it wouldn't be ours forever. Our initial plan was to move to the countryside somewhere, get a few more acres, room for the dogs to run around, probably a garden. But we knew if we did that, that would be setting down some roots. You do something like that, you're not going to move for a long time, if ever. So instead, we said to each other, "Oh, darling, let's do something entirely different. Let's be adventurers. Let's sell everything we own and travel. Let's sell everything that we own, literally, and travel around the world." I should clarify, we were not adventurers. We both grew up in small Midwestern towns and never really moved further than a couple hours from home. But we put our little house in the market, and we started to sell everything. And it's daunting at first when you decide to liquidate your life. You have all these objects that you've accumulated over the years, these very self-identifying things. But after a little bit, you sell something and you get a little bit of a rush out of it. It doesn't take too long for minimalism to become an addiction. Before you know it, everything that you own fits in a 34-liter backpack. 34 liters is small enough to be carry-on luggage. So the house sold, and we quit our jobs. We sold our cars. We put a couple boxes of keepsakes in storage. We had a wonderful goodbye party with all of our friends. And on April 11th, 2012, we stuffed those 34-liter backpacks into overhead storage on a one-way flight to Iceland. I remember being on that plane, and I remember the flood of emotions. It had been about a year before I had decided to do this. Excuse me. It was exciting. It was terrifying. I don't know that it was such a scandal to all of our friends and family. They were incredibly supportive. But right here, very scandalous. I really felt like I had just gotten away with something I wasn't supposed to be doing. More than that, I couldn't really comprehend what I had just done to my entire life. But none of that mattered because soon enough we were in Iceland, and we hiked across the tops of sea cliffs and waterfalls and mountains that I still cannot pronounce. And I ate fermented shark because it's adventurous to have that atrocious taste in your mouth for about 5 days straight. We went to Scotland. We met up with friends of friends of friends who were the most amazing group of hippies renovating a dilapidated mansion outside of Glasgow. We ate our way through Madrid, Barcelona, Toulouse, and Paris. We flew to Georgia, the country Georgia, where I was introduced to the best wine on earth, and I know it's the best because I drank it for a month straight due to the aggressive hospitality of the Georgian people. We traveled by land along the Black Sea down into Turkey. We hiked all over Cappadocia. We flew over Cappadocia in a hot air balloon. We hitchhiked with the Turkish Air Force. We went kayaking in the Mediterranean, and we experienced the pure magic of Istanbul at the beginning of Ramadan. By the time Ramadan was over, we were in Sarajevo for a week, getting a very sobering history lesson. We went to Dubrovnik. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, that's also known as King's Landing. I found out there's a secret hole in the city wall where you can climb down the rocks and jump right into Blackwater Bay. We made our way up Croatia. On an island one night, we were walking back from a nude beach, which was on my bucket list. Ran into a Slovakian couple, incredibly friendly and very eager to share their weed and homemade sherry, two things very new to me at the time. So I don't remember much of that night, but I know I saw the most colorful sunset I'll probably see for the rest of my life. In the Julian Alps in western Slovenia, we helped a woman remodel an ancient stone building into a bed and breakfast for 2 weeks in exchange for room and board. She was kind enough to drive us over to Venice for a day trip. And it rained all day, and I paid about €60 for a pizza that came with sliced up hot dogs all over it, so I'm gonna say Italy needs a do-over really bad. We ran into a couple of Australian backpackers who soon became our adopted sisters. They traveled with us to Budapest, Prague, and Berlin while the autumn leaves changed. In Jordan, we stayed in a Bedouin camp in between days of hiking all over Petra. A few days later, I found myself really surprised to be on a rooftop in Amman, launching a very short-lived modeling career for, this is true, Jordan's first and only LGBT magazine. In Thailand, we made a very dear friend, and with him, we ran all over Chiang Mai during the Loy Krathong festival, lighting floating lanterns and fireworks. We took a 2-day boat ride down the Mekong into Laos. There we befriended a 20-year-old monk who invited us up to his parents' village in the remote mountains. When we got there, they freshly slaughtered a goat for us, and we ate every compelling bit of that goat, including a bowl of congealed blood for dessert, which I don't think I could have done if I wasn't shooting Lao whiskey all morning using that goat's horn as a shot glass. We traveled by bus and train and motorbike from Hanoi to Saigon and ate everything Anthony Bourdain told us to. We went to Cambodia, where I found out if you get there early enough and you find the right security guard, it only takes a smile and $5 American to witness the sunrise from inside Angkor Wat almost completely alone. There was a couple more beaches, a full day layover in Tokyo, and our final airplane over the sea to San Francisco. I spent about half the money we had left on a beat-up Volvo station wagon. It took us up the coast, through the redwoods. We saw friends and family in Portland, Seattle, Washington State, Salt Lake City, Estes Park, and our final tourist stop, Eldon, Iowa, the American Gothic House. So at this point in the story, you might think this is the setup for some sort of romantic comedy, kind of like when Adam Sandler attempts one of those awkward, serious roles. Or maybe it's more of a quirky indie film where everything is so wonderful, but the third act gets a little bit darker, and hopefully the ending is bittersweet. That's exactly what this is. So I went back to my old job, which was cleaning windows. I had done that for about 8 years before I left. And life was very strangely, very quickly familiar again. I was doing the exact same thing I had done a year prior. It involved a lot of looking at my own reflection all day. And there was this strange cloud over me. I would say it didn't change too much, but home wasn't really home anymore. Underneath that cloud of confusion was a painful realization of everything I had sacrificed for adventure. And it wasn't just my Star Wars toy collection. It wasn't my old truck. It wasn't even that wonderful house. It was my sense of home. You know, when you go on vacation for a week or two, you're gonna get back to work. Monday and Tuesday are generally awful. If you go away for a year, your whole equilibrium is thrown off, and it might just stay off for a while. And you might ask yourself, was I supposed to come home at all? she found her equilibrium a lot faster than I did. More than that, she knew exactly what adventure she was ready for next, which was putting down those roots we talked about and starting a family. And I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know what adventure I was ready for, and I didn't know what I was capable of at all. And the best year ever was followed by the worst. And soon we separated, and that separation quickly turned into divorce. And I spent some time wandering, not geographically this time, just wandering around in my own head. And all that old Instagram inspiration, those Psalms and Proverbs, they don't work at all anymore. You can say to yourself all you want, Tony, not all who wander are lost. But the truth is, most of us who wander are totally lost. And more than that, if we're going to quote Lord of the Rings, we need to point out those hobbits did have a goal. My only goal was to get lost. And I accomplished that in ways I didn't expect. And so I needed a new start, a fresh environment. But as it turns out, it wasn't the mountains that were calling. It was Des Moines. And this time around, I fit every worldly possession into my little hatchback. And I remember sitting in my car, once again terrified, probably 10 times as terrified as when I was on that flight to Iceland. I'd been to all these places. I had thrown caution to the wind more times than I could count. I had eaten a lot of things, and I still haven't looked up the health risks about some of those. So I'm probably some sort of an adventurer at this point, officially. But I was terrified of coming here, because it wasn't an adventure I wrote into my life. I didn't decide this. And I would do this venture alone. It was the first time I'd been alone in 16 years. I think we spend a lot of our lives waiting for that day when we get to ride off into the sunset. But we're rarely prepared when the sun actually comes up the next day. It's been about 1.5 years since the sun came up. She's planted those roots in rural Iowa, about 100 acres, organic farm. It's a setting that's very rare. And I live in Des Moines, which I've come to find out might be very me. I still have a couple of adventure tattoos that live with me from that year. One I got before I left that says, "Destination unknown." And one I got when I came back that says, "Homeward bound." And they exist they're on my calves. They face each other. Originally designed as bookends to a chapter of my life. But anymore, when I think about that year, I think about places I've been, where I'm going, and where I am now, I think that destination unknown and homeward bound just mean the same thing. Thanks.